Open for Business is presented by Eagle Broadcasting Corporation and Globe My Business. Create your success.
Greetings from the Philippines to the world. It's February 9, 2019, 5:02 p.m. here in Manila. We are on Facebook Live on Eagle News and also on our digital channel, eaglenewslive.com. Watch the video also in the Eagle News channel on YouTube. I am Cesar Vallejos. We are open for business. Join me to discover the latest news and information and business around the world. Stay ahead of the curve from vision to action. The peso is 52.29 against the dollar, and at the closing of trade last Friday, the Philippine Stock Exchange Index closed at 8070.89, down 29.41 points or 0.36%. This afternoon, we will be talking about sports. According to the World Economic Forum, this sport will soon be a billion-dollar business with a global audience of over 300 million fans. But it doesn't involve a ball, stadiums, or grass pitches. Welcome to the world of esports. Esports, short for electronic sports, is the name given to professional competitive gaming where competitors play video games while being watched by a live audience and millions more watch the games online, including here and in the Philippines. And we have an online games business veteran who is with us in the set of Open for Business to tell us more about the excitement and growth happening in this industry. We will have the conversation with Alex C. after these headlines from our business news provider, Business Mirror.
This portion is brought to you by Business Mirror, a broader look at today's business.
Philippine dollar reserves rose to 82.13 billion in January. Duterte to OK rice tariff bill. More cost efficient to invest in Philippines than to hire Pinoy workers for jobs in Europe, according to the ambassador. The country's gross international reserves as of end January again breached the $80 billion mark due to the net foreign currency deposits of the government and the increase in the international price of gold. Data released by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas on Thursday showed that the country's dollar reserves during the period rose to $82.13 billion from $79.19 billion in December 2018. The BSP said its income from investments abroad and its foreign exchange operations also boosted the country's dollar reserves in January. However, the increase in reserves was partially tempered by payments by the national government for servicing its foreign exchange obligations, BSP Governor Nestor Espenilla said in a statement. The central bank keeps a certain volume of GIR as it will be used to maintain liquidity in case of an economic crisis. This ensures that the country has enough dollars for imports and prevents shortages should instability arise. The BSP said the end January level of GIR continues to serve as an ample external liquidity buffer and is equivalent to 7.2 months worth of imports of goods and payments of services and primary income. It is also equivalent to 6.2 times the country's short-term external debt based on original maturity and 4.2 times based on residual maturity. The opening up of the Philippine rice market is inevitable, as Malacanang said President Duterte will not veto the rice certification bill, even as he acknowledged that it will be detrimental to farmers. Duterte had a dialogue with rice farmers, millers, and retailers last Wednesday to discuss their concerns over the measure. They deemed the dialogue as their last-ditch effort to convince the president to veto some of the bill's provisions, particularly the removal of the National Food Authority's power to intervene in the local rice market. However, Duterte will consider their concerns before acting on the bill, which would convert the quantitative restriction on rice into tariffs. He has ordered the Department of Agriculture, Department of Finance, Department of Trade and Industry to consolidate all of the issues raised by the stakeholders. Agriculture Secretary Emmanuel Piñol said, and the President will look at the report first before acting on the bill. The President is open to reducing the allocation for research under the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund and transfer it to direct support for farmers, according to Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez. This is to provide farmers with a better safety net once the rice tarification bill is signed into law. Government economists estimate prices of rice will go down 4 pesos to 7 pesos per kilo once the bill is in place. However, farmers fear this could spell the death of the domestic rice industry as the NFA is removed of its power to manage the volume of imports. Companies abroad, such as those in the European Union, are starting to realize that it is more cost-efficient to invest in the Philippines than hire Filipino workers to work in Europe. EU Ambassador Franz Jessen said investing in the Philippines and hiring workers locally is a win-win situation for both companies and the workers. Jessen said one such European company now operating in Davao is among the first to think about this option. He said by locating to the Philippines, the company saves on airfare allowances and does not separate workers from their families. The ambassador said it is better to attract foreign direct investments so that Filipinos can work in their own country and they can create the work here and not go abroad and use their skills there. The key to increasing investments, however, is infrastructure. Jessen said that while he cannot pass judgment on whether government's massive infrastructure program is progressing, he can say that it is a step in the right direction. Jessen added, addressing the country's infrastructure constraints can ease congestion in ports, airports, and even the streets of Metro Manila, which are costing billions in lost revenues due to delays and man-hours lost. The study made by the Japan International Cooperation Agency last year estimated that traffic in Metro Manila costs 3.5 billion daily as of 2017. This is higher than the 2.6 billion estimate made by JICA in 2012. Based on the 2016 survey on overseas Filipinos, the Philippine Statistics Authority said there were 2.24 million Pinoys working abroad. Of this, around 6.6% or 147,840 are working in Europe. The largest concentration of Filipinos abroad, or 85%, are located in Asia, particularly Western Asia, at 56.9%. In Western Asia, the most number of OFWs are located in Saudi Arabia at 23.8%, followed by the United Arab Emirates at 15.9%. We will be talking with online games business veteran Alex C. Open for Business will be back. Stay tuned.
Open for Business is presented by Globe My Business. Create your success.
Open for Business, and with me is online games business veteran Alex C. Thank you, Alex, for
Pleasure to be here.
joining the show. The topic is very exciting. It's the rise of esports. But I have to ask you first, what is esports? What is online gaming basically esports?
Oh, well, I think just to make this clear, esports is basically something like someone invented a new basketball.
Okay.
And that's basically what people like to play, and people get really good at it, and some people who are fans of the game like to watch it, right? So essentially, it's actually not different from a sport. You just play it on computer.
Okay. Speaking of that, you said it's not really very different from the traditional sports. But what are these very exciting esports games now playing?
Well, right now in the Philippines, there's Mobile Legends, so it's
Okay.
basically played.
And
on
I think
mobile
that's the
phone.
only game I know because my sons play that.
Right, right.
Okay. So, yes. Okay. When they play mobile games, is that already esports?
Well, you're
Or
essentially
Mobile Legends?
I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Well, you're not really like doing esports, or you're not part of esports just by playing.
Okay.
So esports, just like traditional sports, you have leagues, you have tournaments.
Okay.
So I think that's when it really becomes esports, and then you can categorize it between amateur level or enthusiast level. Then there's the professionals. So the difference between these is basically, I think it's amateurs or grassroots tournaments. People just play because they love the game. So it's like a pickup game of basketball, right?
Yes.
But
Okay.
on the professional level, you're talking about sanctioned tournaments, possibly leagues, and more than that, I think you can probably think of the way that these esport athletes, right? These esports athletes, they're actually conditioned in the same way that you would for professional athletes. So there's mental training, I think there's also
Really?
discipline. There's actually physical training and diet as well. So
Oh, wow.
probably not in the same way that traditional sports are done. Like you don't really have a
Physical
like
exercise.
you would have that.
Oh,
It would
you-
be part.
okay.
It would be part of your regimen, but it's not really something that you'd say that you have to like do 100 push-ups to get arm strength to be able
Okay.
to play better, right? But
Okay.
you need to have I think some optimal level of physical conditioning so that your mind actually performs well, and you really have you cultivate a discipline in order to, I think, be better at the game, think better, move better, something like that. I mean,
Okay, now that you're describing that, what's an ideal esports gamer? As you mentioned, you have to have this kind of mental preparation. When you look at, like, say, for athletes, they have to have a desired or an ideal weight, But with esports athletes, how do you describe an esports athlete?
well, you play basketball. Are you a fan?
I watch
You watch,
Okay,
right?
okay,
Right. So
yes.
I think you engage online about, I think, talk about teams and talk about players, right? And you hear this term called basketball IQ. Like, this guy has high basketball IQ, therefore he's a good player, so on and so forth, right? So for games, I believe that anyone who's actually going to be good at it will need that level of high gaming IQ, and that's game specific, right? So an ideal esport athlete needs to know his game inside out. Just like, whew, I think, like, let's say you're a basketball player and then you play for a team under a coach,
Okay.
and he has a playbook,
Okay.
right? You need to know all of that.
Okay.
You need to know that, and you need to have one of those, because the game really, the games that are esport level, they really have they have an environment. We call it the meta, MTA, right? It has a meta, and people who are really competitive, they adapt to all these changes. So the game developers, the one who makes the game, so you can say that, let's say basketball, right? Let's just say a player so dominant, right? Like Shaquille, right? He's so dominant in the paint that they made, I think, a 3 in the key rule. You can't stay inside the paint for more than 3 seconds, stuff like that, right? Whenever something a player manages to exploit something in an esport that they just do the same tactic over and over again, right?
I see.
It becomes kind of boring for everyone, the players, the audience, and whatnot, and that forces a change. So, giving this examples, right? It's like basketball, esports. You see the connection now, right? So
Okay.
it's no different from an esport athlete and a traditional athlete.
Okay, now you mentioned a basketball player like Shaquille. So basically, he's a brand, an icon actually. So now, in relation to esports, are there also stars or famous esports enthusiasts or gamers?
Well, actually, there are in different games, but I think it would be kind of pointless to like describe all the names and all that. But
yes.
there are, and
Because in traditional gaming, it's there are the more popular you are, the higher your fee is. So I understand in esports there's also, because there are tournaments and games and a lot of challenges and competitions, there is also prize money involved, and I heard it's even bigger than the traditional sports tournaments.
well, actually, that's you're referring to Dota 2.
Okay.
So they have this annual tournament called the International, and the prize pool is basically crowdfunded. So during the season, they put out not really an item, but they put out a service called the Battle Pass,
Okay.
and people can purchase this Battle Pass, and they either play the game to increase the level of the Battle Pass, or they can pay to just level it up faster. So all the proceeds of anything spent there actually gets funneled into funding additional prize money on top of what
Oh.
Valve puts up there.
So the more people who watch it, the higher the prize money.
More people who buy the item that I mentioned.
Oh, more people who buy
Yes,
the
of
item.
course, when people buy it, it also gives them access to watch certain parts of the entire tournament. So that's actually just one part of it. So people, that's just Dota 2. But there are other titles, other games that are also esports that don't really follow the same insanely high prize pool. But like I said, as a traditional sports franchise with esports, it's the same thing. People are actually getting money, not just prize money. So you have professional athletes, so they
Okay.
get signed, they get paid,
Okay,
right?
yes.
And the people who have teams, they get sponsors, they get advertisements. Same thing with the league itself. So there's really no. I think we don't just. I think the lines between esports and traditional sports, it's kind of blurring because essentially it's the same thing. How you earn from traditional sports and how you earn from esports, it's actually getting closer. But I believe that the potential for esports in terms of earnings for the company, the league, and all that, it's actually higher because there's, I think one thing's the price point. Like to be able to enjoy a game that's related to esports, you don't really have to spend a lot. Like let's just say you want to watch a game live,
Okay.
right? Want to watch a game live, so there aren't really. Wait, let me let me take that back. Actually, there are some tournaments that have quite high. They do have entrance fees, but of course,
For how much? Like.
like maybe $100 or so,
Oh, okay.
right? Or more. Actually,
But in the
right?
Philippines, like if I will watch an esports tournament,
right.
How much would I invest?
Oh,
How much would I
Actually,
buy the
we
ticket
we
for?
don't really have entrance fee tournaments, entrance fee live tournaments lately.
Okay.
But there was there were a few like 2018, like January 17, I think up to as early as 2015. So that these were actually Dota 2 tournaments, right?
I
But
see.
that's really not the I think the main topic here, right? It's
Okay, correct.
But
Yeah, but I'm very interested, Alex, because aside from Dota 2, there's League of Legends, Counter Strike, Overwatch, Hearthstone. I hope I pronounce them right.
Yeah.
StarCraft, World of Warcraft. And based on the data that I mentioned earlier, it's really gaining traction. In the global arena, there's a lot of viewers.
Right.
So here in the Philippines, what are the drivers of growth as more Filipinos, more online gamers participate?
Well, number one for viewership is it definitely has to be a game that people are playing.
Okay.
Right? Uh, they're playing this game and they like it so much that when people play it really well, then they gravitate towards to watching these people. And when they start competing, it's like you have, let's say, 8, 16 teams that people know of, and people know that they're good because these teams, they probably live stream themselves, so people can watch them play.
Okay.
Right? They can see that this guy is really good using certain characters inside the game, or this guy is really good playing the game that they can do feats that normally can't be done by an average player. And that's really the thing, but it has to be relatable, meaning I play this game. You need to have people who actually play the game or people who find watching this game entertaining. So it's, again, just like sports, right? So if someone turns out to be the Michael Jordan of a game and it's like he's on an unbelievable winning streak, then of course people are going to tune in and watch and say, hey, this guy's playing in this tournament, right? He's never been beaten yet. Is he going to keep winning in this tournament? And if he keeps winning, obviously more people start watching. So it's really just like a sport. It's just that people just need to understand what it is they're watching, right? But it's no different from basketball.
Okay. Now, being a gamer yourself, you developed.
I don't develop.
Oh, okay. You are into the business
Right.
of online games. So, in terms of numbers, how can you, in terms of quantity, in terms of percentage, and in terms of demographics, can you describe the market for esports here in the Philippines?
Oh, that's I can say
just
that
a
it's-
rough estimate.
I can tell you that it's quite young, right? But definitely you have the potential to reach millions of gamers. There are definitely millions of gamers. I mean, you just look at you just look at the statistics about how many people have internet connections and how much time they spend online.
Yeah.
These people don't even have to be gamers to watch it because
Yes.
the fact that most broadcast media right now for online games or esports are actually on Facebook. It's
Yeah.
actually easy to reach people now as long as they're online, they're on Facebook, and Filipinos love their Facebook.
Correct.
Right. So it's actually quite the potential and the possibility of how many people are going to be in on this esports. It's kind of like it's variable. But it's going to be huge, like in the millions, definitely. But
I
in terms
see.
of like peak concurrent viewership, meaning X amount of people watching a live stream of a game at the same time, I believe we've hit somewhere around 35, maybe around 30 plus thousand concurrent viewers. So if you actually translate that to how many people tuned into that maybe 8-hour broadcast, then I think it would be quite staggering.
Wow, that's 30. You said 35,000
Concurrent viewers.
Ah, okay.
It's like at 5 o'clock, how many people are watching this program right now? 35,000. So of course people like tune out, tune in, tune out, tune in, come back, right?
Okay.
So
And
it's a lot.
there's a combination of watching it online and watching it on a live audience, like
and on TV.
and on TV.
Yes.
So that could even be bigger. Like for example, but are there specific events that you really create and then have it on a specific venue and people watch both online and they go to that specific event?
Yes, actually, it's been done quite a few, actually numerous times in the Philippines, not just for one game, multiple games actually. Going way back to 2004, these things have already happened with Ragnarok Online. It's an RPG, so it's a role-playing game where you have to like make your character stronger, but they find a way to turn it into a competitive format. And of course, it starts with a lot of people engaging in this format. They like, okay, it's called PvP, player versus player. It's basically character versus character,
Okay.
right? It's like, okay, my character's stronger than yours, so on and so on. And
Okay.
then it develops into like teams, and then the game developers start setting a format. It's like, okay, for competition, you have to follow these parameters, right? So as early as 2004, and even earlier than that with other games. There's so many games actually. Even in the 1990s, there's already there are already esport games, esport tournaments, right? So it's just, I think now that people and maybe the media, right, like Facebook Live, Twitch, YouTube, basically these live streaming platforms and the technology, I think it really developed to a point that it's really ripe to turn this into a big thing, and that's why you have the billion-dollar industry
yes.
reports and all
And I
that,
hope
right?
the Philippines can also, grow that and take advantage of
Actually,
that. But my last question before we go
Sure.
into a break. Um, I ask about demographics. Like, what specific? I know that a lot of millennials, do this. When you go to BPOs, to stations, and to a lot of places, a lot of people are hooked into it. What's the specific demographic profile in terms of?
I guess we could probably say a wide range of, I think, 13 to around 30.
13 to 30.
Yeah, I think it also spills over to
Okay.
other people like me. I mean, I'm past 30, but I'm still like part of the ecosystem.
Okay.
And in terms of like, I think people playing, it would be dominantly male. There's a small percentage of women playing, but I think women watching, I think that's something that I think that needs more research, and it definitely would be higher than the number of women playing, because women, their partners, boyfriends, whatever, right? They'll be into it, so they'd kind of like be dragged along to like watching, and maybe it would grow on them. But it's definitely hitting the mainstream.
Okay, perfect. There's a lot of more questions to ask with Alex C when Open for Business returns. Stay tuned. Open for Business is back, and I hope you are hearing us clearly. Just send your comments on Facebook Live. We're still on, and we're still here with Alex C. We finished earlier with the demographics. Now, I'd like to really know the ecosystem of esports. Who are the participants? Because that would lead me to, of course, a lot of entrepreneurs are watching also. A lot of entrepreneurs operate internet cafes and all that. But can you describe the entire ecosystem of esports?
Sure. Okay, so basically, for an esport actually to exist, a game developer has to make the game. So that's one way you can get into this entire thing. But being
And game developers
Yeah.
are also it's another job description, and I think they're getting a lot of money. It's actually one of the the jobs that's very that has high demand.
Well, as a game developer and making games, especially esport games, I mean, it's no joke. I mean, as a small-time entrepreneur, I think that's something that's very overreaching. So that's you really have to have a lot of money, like millions of dollars, and you also need to have millions of dollars for operational expenses. But without these game developers, whom there are a lot making esport titles or planning to make esport titles. Without these guys, there wouldn't be esports, obviously, right? So that's number one.
Okay.
There has to be someone who invents the game,
Okay.
right? Then the
Oh,
other,
but by the way, with the game developers, do you remember basically that specific institution who first developed this?
oh well,
The ones that are more.
I mean, just in the beginning. I mean, you really wouldn't be able to know who's the first in this thing, right? But if you're talking about the roots.
Yeah.
Atari, Pong,
Yes,
the game,
right.
right? Atari, and Family Computer and all that. So it just goes from there, and then. But I think one of the quintessential titles isn't even like it just happened by accident. So there are two games. There's Counter Strike, and
Okay.
then there's Dota.
Okay.
Defense of the Ancients, the original one. So Counter Strike and Dota, these are actually games made by, I think Counter Strike was made by Sierra, or anyway, it's now under Valve, and then Dota is actually a mod made from this game called Warcraft 3. It's a strategy game made by Blizzard, Activision, Blizzard mostly, and what happened was these games could be modified, and there are these fans of the game, right, who are also into like making games. So they modify it. They made modifications on the game, and then they put it out to the public, and people started playing it, and they loved it. So Counter Strike was actually originally derived from a game called Half-Life. I mean, let's not get into the specifics. So basically, these are games not built for esports. Someone came in, modified it, and turned it competitive, and then suddenly
I
people
see.
went
I
crazy.
see.
It's like they just couldn't stop playing it. There's this level of
see.
competition. There's this thing that this experience that you have, like when you're playing basketball, or even when you're like I don't know, playing poker, right? There's this element of competition, and then there's this way that you can change things, and it kind of changes the way the game's played. So it's like if one strategy is really dominant, the people can actually like change certain things, modify it, and then suddenly, it's a whole new thing that people have to relearn just to stay competitive. So
Wow.
it started from that, and it kind of like blew up. It's like Dota 2 is made by Valve, right? The owner of the Steam platform. Basically, if you're playing games on the PC, most of them you would be playing on Steam, right? So they don't really own it, right? There's this controversy before of who owns Dota, because Dota was made on a game that was owned by this other company, and this other company wants to license and trademark Dota 2, right? So there was that controversy, but at the end, just all ironed itself out, and it started from those games, and suddenly it's like people start building games, developing games. With
So
that
you
in
have
mind.
the game developers. So
Yeah.
who else are involved
then
in the ecosystem?
then for the esports, right? What really made esports what it is, without not just it wasn't obviously just the game developers. You have the promoters of the tournament, the people who make these leagues, right? So prior to a certain time, people actually did these esport leagues, these tournaments, these professional leagues themselves, as in you're a third party without any affiliation to the game developer, right? You're a third party, and you recognize that this game has a potential to be a competitive sport that people want to watch, that people want to pay to see pro players. They want to buy merchandise based on the league and whatnot, or even buy merchandise of the teams, and we'll get to that shortly, right? So these promoters, these people who organize these events, they're really the ones who made esports really popular, really big, right? So these are third parties, right? And it came to a point that the game developers and game publishers realized that, hey, these guys are making a lot of money off our IP, right? This is our intellectual property.
Yeah.
So they kind of stepped in and said that, hey, for certain games, right? It's like if you want to make a tournament and you want to monetize it, you got to go through us, the game developers / game publishers, right? And it's like it's actually fair, to be honest, right? Because the game developers themselves would be able to give support and proper support in order to make sure that these tournaments that these organizers are promoting. So if you want to ask about who's an organizer here, so I think the pioneer ones would be Mineski, right?
Is it based here in the Philippines?
Yes, they are actually.
okay.
They're Southeast Asia based.
Oh, I
Right.
see.
So they started with the original Dota, the one that I mentioned, of
Yeah,
mods and
okay.
all that, right? They started there, and they really invested a lot of money and time into learning how to do this esports thing, and I think it paid out, as they are one of the biggest esport organizers, not just in the Philippines but in Southeast Asia.
Interesting. Before I ask again on the, we go back into the entrepreneurship side of online gaming or esports. I'd like to ask the one coming from Marvin Laurente, who commented, how can you promote discipline and sportsmanship in playing online games? Yeah, that's very relevant question, because like in my case as a parent, you know, if you have let's say 50% or even 60% of the internet time devoted by kids to playing games, how would that impact on their behavior, on their discipline? And as you mentioned, since traditional sports and esports are blurring, and sportsmanship is really promoted in traditional games, how do you do that in the electronic version of sports?
Well, and let me let me just put this out there that anything in excess is bad. You know, it doesn't matter whatever it is, right? Games, social media, you know, not working, you know, anything like that. But in order to promote discipline and sportsmanship in esports, well, I think it's really hard to do this for everybody, because at the end of the day, these games, right? These games that people are playing on esports, they're essentially games before they are esports. They are esport-ready games. So in the field of esports, right? When you have professional tournaments, when you have these amateur leagues leading to professional tournaments, or amateur tournaments that have the potential for players to be scouted as professional players, I think this is kind of like an entire community thing. The fans, the players themselves, the organizations who are scouting players, they all have an active role in making sure that you scout a player, you sign a player, you promote a player who actually is willing to learn what it takes to be an esport athlete, and follow the discipline. So as professional teams cultivate their talent, they are the ones responsible for the discipline of their players, like giving them a training regimen, giving them a practice time, and of course, when you really want to get into esports, right, you don't just play the game. You play the game with a certain mindset that you know that these are the strategies, and you've got to be able to counter these strategies. So basically, you play with a goal in mind, that I have to beat this and that. You set goals for yourselves when you play. Most people, of course, they just play to unwind and just pass the time. So when you're doing that, you know, that you can't like bunch that together with the discipline in esports. And it's really up to the leagues on how they implement that discipline. I mean, it's not a secret that the Philippines has quite a bad reputation in terms of its online community. I mean, not just in games, in general. I mean, the trolls on Facebook, and it also gets translated to the games. So the game developers themselves also have some sort of responsibility, especially if the Philippines is one of their main markets. You really have to put the foot down, right?
Yeah, so in short, there are also rules to follow.
Yes,
so there are
course.
ethics
there
to
are.
follow.
Yeah.
And where do you get that? Is it something like, say, with similar to the GDPR, where you have to, in terms of private information, you know, the things that you cannot share?
When people sign up for the game accounts, right?
Okay.
So it starts from there. There's a end user license agreement.
Okay.
There are like privacy policy, like things that you have to agree on, right? So it's basically a lot of things that people don't read. But it's actually in there, the code of conduct and whatnot, right?
Okay.
It's actually in there, but you know, it's like you're doesn't matter how big a game company is.
Yeah.
You're servicing millions of people.
Yeah, but is it now, like, say, are there some specific regulations where there are associations that, you know, tell the e-gamers this is what to do, not what to do, or these are what's allowed and not allowed? Are there associations or you know, that give that?
Recently, the Games and Amusement Board started coming in already for regulating not just athletes, right, but as well as the people involved in esports, meaning basically the broadcasters and the talent who are part of the broadcast, they're basically called shoutcasters. So they're basically the ones calling the action. So it's like a commentator in
I
traditional
see.
sports, right?
I see.
These people need licenses, and of course
Correct.
they have to go through like mandatory drug tests and so on, right?
Mm-hmm,
So it's just starting, and you really can't say that there's a proper framework.
Yeah.
It's all a work in progress, but right now a lot of these or a lot of organizers like Menesky and so on, right? They're obviously working with the government in terms of like collaborating on how to actually make the ecosystem. And there's actually the SEA Games, right? That has esports.
Oh, interesting. Before we go to
Yeah.
SEA Games, I also read this article. It says esports has become so popular that even the International Olympic Committee is trying to understand it better. So the fact that even the International Olympic Committee is now looking at it, it has really grown so big. So now you're saying with the Southeast, with the SEA Games,
Yeah.
there's esports.
Yes.
I see. How like say, so would your team or any specific group that's now preparing for the SEA Games?
I believe that the SEA Games is kind of like a big collaboration. So as far as I know, a group called Goliath Concepts by Jobert. So he's actually one of the people involved, I think, as a technical partner. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact title that was used, right? But they're involved in that, and there are a lot more people actually behind the scenes in that. There's obviously an NSA that was created for esports. As a matter of fact, I believe that multiple people tried to make NSAs to get into the esports thing, right? Yeah, there's that, and I believe government's part of it, and even a big company, Razer, they're basically one of the people really supporting the SEA Games having esports.
Okay, now because I mentioned earlier, we're running out of time. I mentioned earlier that a lot of entrepreneurs are watching. I'm just so interested. How would the esports also help entrepreneurs, small ones, especially the ones who are operating internet cafes, especially the startups also who wish to take advantage of the growth of esports?
Well, I think for internet cafes, definitely people who want to play the game, they need an outlet. And if they can't afford to buy computer, then definitely internet cafes can help them start out learning the game, playing the game. And for entrepreneurs, to be honest, if you look at how traditional sports are done, there's a lot of things. Like there's of course production. So if you're an entrepreneur, you could actually get into doing production for esports, doing graphics, doing video, like video content, or like producing video. What do you call that? Like producing overlays for the broadcast. There are actually a lot of things, and of course, some people can also. If you really want to, you could probably try some sort of a esport, not really esport, but like graphic design courses, like what you need to learn in order to be able to produce or be part of an esport production. It's basically the lines are really blurred a lot. Traditional broadcast techniques or like functions like what you're doing right now. That's also something that you do on esports. So it's just that aside from traditional TV, right? Now you have other programs, basically esport programs or gaming programs, that also need the same level of expertise. So it's something you can also supply the equipment needed for that, right? So there's really a lot of opportunities. You just have to understand the esport and just don't think that this is just a game, this is just a pastime. They are both, but they are more than that as well. And to the people who still don't understand, these games, these online games, it's not equal to the e-games that is gambling. That's really something that constantly gets brought up, and I just really like
it's
people
good
to-
that you mentioned
Yeah,
that.
I'd really just like people to not associate e-games to these online games. And now that we're running out of time, I do have to.
Yeah.
just
I
give a
think
shout
that
out to someone.
Yeah, there's a lot watching you now. Okay.
Yeah,
give
I'd
us
just
a-
like to give a shout out to Edsel. You shared this stream, so yeah, there you go. It's actually what a lot of streamers do. They watch these, they look at these things, and then there are these guys. It's like shout out.
Okay, that's
Right,
good. Now,
yeah.
my last question, Alex, is what are the opportunities for esports here in the Philippines? Are we also expecting tournaments, special events? Because I think Eagle Broadcasting would be interested to partner in developing esports as long as we promote discipline and in sportsmanship. What do you see are the opportunities for esports here in the Philippines?
Well, definitely there's the opportunity to start leagues. Start making tournament leagues.
Okay.
Start making tournament leagues that just don't end in the Philippines, right? It's like you can organize a tournament for a game that the Philippines actually has access to, bring them to a Southeast Asian competition.
Okay.
And when they win, and if they can't win the Southeast Asian competition, there's a world event or world tournament to look forward to. So there's actually a lot of
And how
things.
good are Filipino gamers? Are we winning? Are we,
Well,
in terms of ranking, is there a
for-
Filipino rank?
In terms of like esport titles that are played worldwide, right? For Dota 2, I mean, everyone watching who knows Dota 2 knows that the Philippines has the talent to go to either make a national team, reach like the highest level tournament, or you have individual Filipino players who are scouted and recruited by teams abroad to play on their team.
Oh, so
And
they're
they-
representing other countries, not necessarily the national team.
I think that's like hard to like be
Okay, but
specific
but
about,
you
yeah.
with your exposure, you
Right.
know Filipinos who are really good in esports.
Yeah.
And they have won and
Yes,
ranked high.
they've reached like top 8. They've reached the international Dota the Dota tournament.
Oh,
They've
interesting.
reached the international more than one time, right?
Okay.
But it's very volatile, and basically lineups change. People have different priorities and whatnot, right? And sometimes teams fall off their game because the difference with I think the difference with actually it's not any different, but a lot of teams, right? They try to perform consistently, but sometimes things just don't go their way. They don't really get to qualify, but other teams manage either by a Philippine group.
But when
or-
you form a teams,
Yeah.
it can be from different locations because
Yeah,
this is via internet.
Yes,
so basically, the connection could be you are part of a team, but you can be in Japan and I'm the Philippines.
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
Because right now, right, most of the esports, right, not really most, but some of the esports, they're not really done by nationality. They're done by esport franchises or esport teams.
Okay.
Right. So it doesn't matter if your team is composed of people in all the like in different regions or in like different continents. It doesn't matter as long as this team comes together, they play well, they win. No
Okay.
problem.
But a team, yeah. So the team can be composed of various nationalities,
Yes.
but they have to be in one specific setting.
Yes, they have to train together, they have to play together, they
Oh,
have to
okay.
compete together. But there are some tournaments or some games with tournaments that are based on national teams.
Okay.
So there are different rules. Like some tournaments will like have a rule where everyone has to be of this nationality, or there could be like you can have one guy who's like from a different country, but the other 3 guys have to be of the same nationality.
I see.
Right, so the fun thing about esports and these games who make esports is I watched this from a Netflix episode, right? It's about esports. So
Okay.
you have a company that's basically they invented basketball. They're the NBA and they're ESPN. Imagine that. You made the game. You can change the game at any time, and you are the one broadcasting the game.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Wow, yes. That's very entrepreneurial. We have to give a shout out to Marilyn Rabago, Angel Kanda as well. And, we have to read this. Any advice or tips that you can give for the gamers?
Well, if you really want to get good, you don't just play for fun. You really have to understand the game that you're playing. Learn not just from peers in the Philippines, but you've got to watch the people who are really good at it in the esport realm. I mean, I know a lot of people watch popular streamers, worldwide, global streamers, right? But they're playing the game for kicks. If you really want to learn or get better at esports, you have to watch the pros, or you have to watch the really competitive guys. And of course, most importantly, you need the discipline, and just ease up on the trash talk, guys.
Okay, well said, well said. That's a great way to end the interview with Alex. He will still be back, and I hope that we can join and we can organize tournament for esports here in the Philippines, and
Definitely.
we'd love to cover that. We will be back. Our term of the week and our quote of the day when Open for Business returns. Stay tuned. In our term of the week, you take a refresher of business terms to make you updated, more informed, and ready to make smarter business decisions. Our term of the week is esports. Esports turns online gaming into a spectator sport. It mimics the experience of watching a professional sporting event, except instead of watching a physical event, spectators watch video gamers compete against each other. The esports trend has become so widespread in recent years that games can often be viewed as an organized arena event. As with traditional sports, these games are broken down into competitive leagues and tournaments. And our quote of the week comes from Walt Disney. He said, "All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." Join us again next Saturday, 5 p.m. Philippine time, for another episode of Open for Business, where we discuss business information, deliver the latest business news to keep you informed and open for business, and be ahead of the curve from vision to action. You're on Facebook Live on Eagle News, and you can watch us again in the video section of the Eagle News Facebook page and on eaglenewslive.com, also on Eagle News YouTube channel. Also visit postinglive.com for news and updates on Open for Business. Catch me later at 9 p.m. and every Wednesday also at 9 p.m. on Net25's Eagle News International as I report more business news here and around the world. For Open for Business, this is Cesar Vallejos. Have a great day.
Open for Business was presented by Eagle Broadcasting Corporation and Globe My Business. Create your success.